We had Mr. Tim Swain from Ghana. He's actually from the United States, but now living with his whole family in Ghana. And then, who did we have last week?
We had Marcia Weeks, a film director for the movie Joseph.
We had
And we
Marcia.
also had
Angela Slack.
Yes.
Who reviewed the movie for the KW magazine, Crucial Connections in Faith and Culture. And that was, I mean, it was off the chain, that conversation, just how it took us into really what it is that we are about on KW magazine, on Crucial Conversations. We want to get to know ourselves. We want to get to know each other. And we want to get to know our Creator. Yes, we want to build deeper and more authentic relationships with Him by getting to know ourselves, getting to know each other. And this is what we're doing right here. So what we have been doing is taking the magazine off the pages, off the written pages, and into your living rooms, onto your phones, into your spaces, so that we can get in deeper, have conversations about the things that can transform our lives as people of African heritage. Yes, the magazine is designed to facilitate conversations about worship and cultural identity among people in the African, on the African continent and in her diasporas. So, all right, the first thing we're going to do today is ask you to share this feed with persons you know. I mean, what we advertise, we put it out there and we say, listen, if you're a parent, if you're a teacher, a godparent, if you are a grandparent, if you are a guidance counselor, we never said that one, but if you're a guidance counselor or a counselor of any kind, then come into this space so that we can have this conversation about children and about raising culturally conscious and aware children using the medium of writing. And so we have in the room today 2 writers. They have written for the magazine. And the first person that we are going to interview, she is going to actually read her story for us. Her name is Janice Wilson. And Janice Wilson is someone who used to actually help us in our work. Yes, Janice Wilson is a teacher. She has been teaching for perhaps over 10 years now in different institutions, a trained teacher. But she's also a writer, and she writes plays and stories. And she is going to, first of all, read the story, and then she's going to share with us a little bit about what it was like growing up in Jamaica as a little Black girl. Janice, are you with us? You can just unmute yourself, show us your beautiful face, and let us press in to this lovely story that you wrote. Yes?
All right, so I'm trying to start my video, but it says the host has stopped it. So I'm not sure how that works.
Okay, so Denise, maybe what we need to do is not share your screen right now so that Janice can, yes, could you try again for me?
It's the same
it's still
thing maybe it's Denise's video.
I understand now.
Oh,
no,
it says start
I
my
fully
video.
get it now. Go, there you are. It is so good to have you, Janice, on this.
Thank you. Thank you
And
for having me.
yes, and I don't think I have seen you since you've become a mother.
Yeah, I think, yes. Last time I saw you, I was about 3.5 weeks from giving birth. Yes.
Yes, right.
Yes.
So I mean, even more so, you are. We need to hear from you now that you are a mother.
Right. I'm really happy to be here. I think this conversation is so necessary, not just for today. I think the ones that you have been having
Yeah.
are absolutely necessary for this time and for our people, especially.
Yes, and so we continue to pray for more grace. We continue
Yeah.
to pray for more grace. And so let me just tell the people a quick story. We
Mhm.
were invited to take the service at a little country church. It was a little Baptist church,
Sligoville, yes.
Sligoville Baptist Church, which is perhaps one of the oldest Baptist churches in Jamaica in terms of when we got emancipation. It was right after emancipation, because this was one of the first free villages in Jamaica. Sligoville was. I remember taking a picture of the church because it was like, I
Yes.
think it was before emancipation, because I think 17 something they started building the church. And we wanted to be relevant to everyone who was going to be in the space, culturally relevant expressions of worship. So I asked Janice to write a story. And the story she's going to read now is the story she wrote for that service. And all away, big Smuddy and little Smuddy sit on the edge of a chair and listen. So take it away, Janice.
All right. So uh, do you want me to read a part of the story or all of it?
Could you please read the whole story?
No problem.
Oh, like a little child. Oh.
All right. All right. So, uh, I honestly had never done anything like this before when you had asked. But I felt it necessary because it was for the children and we can't leave them out. We
No.
shouldn't leave them out of the worship space.
Yes.
And so I was excited to do this. So, all right. So I didn't give the story a name at the time. All right. So I'll start. One Sunday, as church about to start, Sister Marcia ring the bell. You see when the bell ring, everybody knows that them to find them Sunday school class right away. Nicolette and Ricardo hurry up, drink them bad juice, and head towards Sunday school class. As them reach in, them separate. Nicolette go sit down beside her friend Alicia, and Ricardo go sit down beside Jamie. Them always sit down beside each other in a Sunday school. Sister Marcia pray, then she remind them that they are going to use the class time for practice with them play or they are going to act for rally July 21st. Before them even could have start, Pastor Chisholm sent call Sister Marcia to ask her something. Oh, I scroll too far. One moment. Sister Marcia couldn't walk from the accident last year, so it's a wheelchair she move around in. As Sister Marcia come out of the room, Jamie start knock one drum in the corner. Same time Alicia start complaining so she can't take the knives, so it better them go and practice for rally. Nicolette take out her Sunday school book and remind them what the play name. It name Come Make We Worship. Sister Marcia did come back and reach the door, but because she hear like them a do something worthwhile and them not idle, she stay at the door and go and listen secretly. Nicolette started to read what she have in her book on worship. She say, worship is like when you praise God, when you show God so you love him, and when you do things to show God so you're thankful for all of what him give you. Foolishness! That's what Jamie in ball out. When my brother Jovian say my worship, I dance, me see my dance. Nicolette turned to him and say, make me finish now. Sister Martha did tell we say, when we are worship God, we can also use the talent for bringing glory. But you wouldn't know that because you ever hide out a door from class like you get security work. All this time them attack, Ricardo now pay them no mind. him have a pencil a draw over the painting of Jesus, and some children will hang up on the wall. Nicolette and Alicia start complain or him not participate. Him just make them know say him no know not about worship. Him just do what him know if he do best, and that a draw. Nicolette turned to him and say, but if you did listen, you would have hear when we say you can use your talent for worship God. You know, have to acting at the play, but you can draw the Bible story for the baby them in a sister than a Sunday school class. Them like pretty picture. Them continue talk. Sister Marcia was behind the door, still a listen. Ricardo said, all right, me can draw, Jamie can dance, and Lisa can write story good, and Nicolette can sing. We are going to do a good play so for we Sunday school class can win the prize and make God happy, so we use with talent for bring him glory. The bell ring for Sunday school over. Sister Marcia push the door and smile and say, Uno come make we go worship. The end.
Okay, so we had actually called the story Come, Make We Worship.
I know. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Denise, you have some questions for Janice, or is me? All right, pretty much. It is this. What was life like growing up in Jamaica as a little Black girl?
All right. So when I was preparing for today, I thought about these kinds of matters, and as it relates to Blackness and growing up in Jamaica, I wasn't aware that there were differences really, or that Blackness was a major difference. Because most of the people I would have been in contact with at school, in my community at home, were people who looked like me.
Yeah.
If I saw people who were different, these people would have been maybe in banks or on TV. So there wouldn't have been a discussion about the difference in how we looked.
Yes.
And so it wasn't until I was in my late teens and I would have started the Michael University College that I would have been exposed to issues concerning race and color and identity. So growing up Black was simply growing up Black.
It was simply growing up. It was just
Yes.
normal.
Yes. I didn't have to face some of the issues that Black children face today.
Yes.
You know?
What about church? What was that like for you and your concept of worship? Because in the story, you tell of these little kids who were discussing what for them was worship. What was it for? What was it for you as a child growing up?
All right. So as a child, I attended almost every single denomination you can think of. And the reason for that was my mother wanted us to be in church. And we didn't have enough clothes to visit just one church. So we'd go to different churches. And it was fine. I think what it did for me, it made me understand that if we are saying the same thing, that Jesus Christ is Lord, he came to die for our sins, and he was raised from the dead, then it's okay. You know. And so even as an adult, wherever I move to, then I find a Bible believing church. It doesn't matter the denomination. But at 10 years old, I remember my classmate, Cheyenne Smith. Cheyenne invited us to the Green Island Wesleyan Holiness Church. And that is a church that I would have gotten baptized in eventually in 2011. So while we were there, my twin sister and I, church was wonderful. I believe our pastor at the time, Pastor Porter, she was a very strict woman. And so there was order. There was order in church. I remember going to church on Saturday evenings at 4 p.m. to practice for songs that we would do in church on Sunday. And it was a wonderful time for us to be together as children, doing what we believed was something important to the grand scheme of things in terms of the worship space. So
Yes.
I felt important to be
Yes.
able to take part in the service in such a way. Yes,
Wonderful. Okay, thank you so much for sharing that. And
you're
I
welcome.
think that the difference between yourself and Sylvia, one of the differences is that she grew up in a slightly older Jamaica, right?
Yeah.
So her story
Mhm.
might be different from yours as a result of that. While we wait for Sylvia to come into the room, we are going to welcome the people who are on Facebook. I've seen Rosamond Brown. I have seen, of course, my Bunanono's husband, Marcel Goff. Um, I have seen Peter Nufo, who we interviewed in episode 2. Peter is all the way in Nigeria and he's watching us now. So, yes, we are happy to have you here. And if you have heard us talking, yes, if you have heard us talking about the KW magazine and you've been wondering how you can get your hands on a copy of the digital version of this magazine, we have in the room with us Sister Rosie. And Sister Rosie is normally on the Facebook side of things, but we rope her in this evening to help us communicate between Facebook and Zoom because our friend Nora couldn't be with us today. And I want to say right in this moment, happy birthday to Nora, who is normally with us inside the Zoom room. Happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday to you, dear Nora. Happy birthday, yeah. All right. So, Sylvia is my good friend from uh, Teachers College. Yes, we both went, and Sylvia, me put you on spotlight because me seeing in the background and we need you in the foreground right about no.
Okay.
And yes, so Sylvia is my good friend from Teachers College, Shortwood Teachers College to be exact. And I tell people all the time I scandalize her by saying she's the one. No, I don't scandalize her. I elevate her by saying she is the one who radicalized me.
Yes, Lord.
But yes, she has become an author. She's a teacher also, of course. She has taught at high school level as well as at university level. And she is now also a mother and a wife. Yes. So both Janice and Sylvia are mothers of boys. So that's interestingly important. But she wrote a book called The Road to Timnah, or if you're going to put it in Jamaican language, The Road to Timnat. And that book has been shortlisted by I don't want to call the wrong name now, Sylvia. Can you tell us what competition it was shortlisted in or what? Yeah,
I know it was shortlisted for the Una Marson Prize.
that's it, the Una Marson
Yes.
Prize.
And I
And
feel honored because she was quite a lady.
yes, yes. And the Una Marson, I mean, yes, we don't take it lightly at all, that book. And I'll tell you about the book too, that when I read the manuscript,
You
I
were the
just
first person
wanted
to
more.
read it.
And that was an honor for me to be the first one to read it. And I really wanted more. And the same thing will happen for you, I am sure, when you read that book. So if you go to Amazon, The Road to Timnah, Timnath. Okay, so Sylvia, I asked you because your stories are a little longer. So yes, people, Gilfillian, Sylvia Dennis-Gilfillian has been writing this one story from the second issue, and she has written 3 episodes so far. And each time we get to the end, we're like, why do you have to carry us on for another? We don't know when the next issue is coming out. But your stories are a little longer than Janice's story. Boy, Janice, every time I hear you read that story, I feel I'm right there with you. So I just had to say that again. Um, Read a portion, please, that you think would best um,
Oh
express.
dear. Well, this is a little bit of a challenge because my light is not very good.
Oh,
But I'm going to try.
yes.
Now, this is the story of a little black girl named Ebony who had an episode when her friends, she had a tablet that she shared at church.
Mm-hmm.
And they took a picture, and one of her friends exclaimed, Lord Ebony, we never know I saw you're black. And that really cut her, and she has been in a state since then. So her mother, she's on her way to her great uncle with her mother. Her mother says, do you know why you were,
Sylvia,
no, sorry, do you wish?
do you need to turn on the light? Because maybe,
Okay, all
yes,
right.
go
Yes,
ahead and turn on the lights. Yes.
okay. This is much better. Thank you very much.
It's more important to hear the story.
Okay, so Ebony's mother says to her, Ebony, do you know why we gave you your name? Yes, Ebony answered guardedly, wondering why her mother had asked the question. Her mother continued, do you wish we had given you another name? Sometimes. Why? I looked up Ebony on Google and it is black. I wish I didn't have to think about black all the time. My darling child, do you think that there's something wrong with being black? Ebony did not answer immediately, and her mother glanced at her briefly before turning her eyes back to the road. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled. Mommy, you and Daddy are always telling me that I'm beautiful, but I don't feel beautiful. Sandra was at a loss for words, and so she reached for Ebony's hand and squeezed it. Ebony continued, Mommy, you know sa Granny love Paul more than how she love me? Me here I telling Auntie P that she don't believe say me's our son pick me. They were passing the Manor Park Plaza and Sandra made a sudden right turn and pulled into a parking space. The driver behind her yelled something when she made the turn, but Sandra ignored him. When she turned off the car and swiveled her body towards her daughter, she saw that her mother was crying. Sandra pulled Ebony into her arms. Ebony wrapped her arms around her mother's neck and the two of them wept for many minutes. Sandra was the first to stop crying, and after she pulled tissues from the glove compartment and began to dry her daughter's tears, she began to talk softly to her child. Ebony hung onto her every word, her eyes unblinking. Would you like me to go on?
No, that is good. Denise, what you say?
Yes.
You want more
Wow.
or make you stop right there so?
Uh,
It's hard, don't.
God.
Let's get the conversation going because
Yeah.
yes, somebody is asking for more, please. One of our people in the audience is asking for more, please. But
Well,
I
it's
suspect
up to you.
that is the spot we need to stop right now.
Yes. And
So
that will encourage them to go and get the magazine
that will
to get the rest of the story.
that will encourage you to get the magazine to get the rest of the story. And let me just pause before Denise jump in because I see her face is lit up, ready to ask her first question. La Reina del Sur says it's an entertaining and inspiring story. And yes, so I need people to know that when you get the magazine on spurropen.com, I'm asking Sister Rosie, can you please share that link with the people? You are eligible for a copy of the Come Make We Worship album that the theme song come from, right? So we have already given away from last week, and we want to give away some more. And we will be inviting Janice back on shortly to ask more so that we can get the conversation going. But anyway, go ahead, Denise, take it away.
All right, Sylvia. So thank you for sharing that story. It's a story that no matter how many times I've heard it, I'm just moved. I'm getting chills. Sometimes good chills, sometimes bad chills. But before we get into that, what was it like growing up black in Jamaica for you?
Well, it was a multiplicity of experiences. In my house, I was born in country, in Trelawney. In my house, there was no issue about color. My father was a dark-skinned black man. My mother was a light-skinned black woman. And the children were every shade in between. It was a non-issue in my house.
Okay.
But in my circle of friends and relatives, I heard comments about which one of us was black, which one. And I remember a relative who shall remain nameless telling me once, the only thing you have, I got for you a little color.
Mm,
I was probably about 5 or 6 years old.
okay.
But by the time I got to school, I began to understand that color was an issue.
Right.
And I became aware of this in the second grade when my very black teacher would beat the black children,
Mm,
but she never touched the mixed race children.
mm,
Okay.
And
Okay.
so at the age of 8, I began to understand and I began to believe that there was something wrong about being black.
mm,
And then I was in that guinea pig group of children who got this common entrance under Michael Manley 1973 when education became free.
Right.
And I got into one of Jamaica's most prestigious high schools, a little country girl who had been barefooted just a few weeks before that. And that was a baptism of fire. And for my entire first year, I was basically silent because me did chat bad according to the standards. People find it shocking when I tell them that I was practically silent for a year because I felt like me chat bad.
mm,
And I went through years of trying to reconcile the education I had received with my reality from where I came. And I didn't find back myself until I took a linguistics class. I didn't begin to find back myself until I took my first linguistics class at Shortwood and realized that the thing that came out of my mouth naturally was indeed a language. And that opened the door to my journey of
mm.
self-acceptance. Till now, me chat pat was till me never care.
Would you like me to translate? Till now, she speaks Jamaican and doesn't care. She could care less who thinks ill of
I
her
am
because of
completely, I have accepted, I am completely bilingual.
it.
Completely bilingual.
Yes.
I can begin a thought in the Queen's English, and by the time I get to the end of it, I'm speaking the most fluent
Mm,
Creole.
yes.
And I write in it. If you check my book, the first 7 chapters are in the Jamaican Creole language.
Mm,
And that is how I became myself again, that,
yes.
together kind of person, because I learned that my blackness was fine. And then I
Wow.
did my DNA study recently and found out I'm 51% Nigerian. Go figure.
Woohoo!
Ooh,
That's awesome. I think I was what? 4%.
interesting. Yeah.
Okay. What about church? Was church any different from school?
Whoops. Well, my church was started by Scottish missionaries,
Mhm.
and they remained in the denomination until the 70s. So, and they were Calvinistic, they weren't into emotions. But my pastor was a local, very Calvinistic also, but we were allowed to clap our hands before the night service, the Sunday night service actually began. But Sunday morning service, we sat, you were supposed to sit up straight and
Yeah.
I remember a story about a woman in one of my sister churches who they said got the spirit, got real happy. And the chair of the mission took her outside, led her out, and
Mm-hmm.
told the people that she had lost her self control and she needed to get it together.
Okay.
But went on, and more locals took over, and the missionaries eventually left. My church became more and more, call it ethnic if you want to.
Okay.
Till now, when I go home, I can hardly recognize my church because my church is now basically as Pentecostal in worship as they come. Clap and sing and
Okay.
dance and the whole shebang.
Gotcha. You know, there are people inside the Zoom room who are getting so excited. I need to tell the people on Facebook that, Janice is saying hallelujah. So it's like church happening up inside here. And Rosie is like, wow, that is so cool. All right. So now to continue the conversation, and I see where Vivette Crosdale is saying shalom. Shalom to you, Vivette. Good to have you in the room. And we are now going to ask Janice to come back into the space now so that we can have one grand hallelujah conversation because we really do want to see how it is that we can move forward. It was Marcus Garvey who said that in order to know where you're going, you need to know your roots.
Yes.
And if our children don't know where they're coming from, they have nowhere to, well, where they're going is questionable at best. Let me put it that way. And so we have some things we want to talk about up inside here, right, Denise?
Yes, we do. Would you like to put the spotlight so we can see all four persons?
You see these things now? All right. Now we should be seeing all four of us
Okay.
inside the room.
I am particularly happy of the way Sylvia shared her experience because there's a YouTube video that we would like to share to concretize the experience that she mentioned about her black skin. I want us to watch this video and then we move on from there. What did I do wrong here?
Okay, come back in.
Yeah,
Take it off back.
yeah, right. It's a video called Black Doll,
Mm-mm.
White White Doll.
So,
Hold
okay.
on.
So while we figure that out, um, if you can stop the screen share, just stop the screen share and start it. And get back on the video and then
Yep,
start it again. All right. Wonderful. So it's a very short video. It's like a minute and 38 seconds. And what it is, some of you have probably seen it before, but when you see it,
you
okay,
will. Yes, you will remember.
we're still seeing the same screen.
Still seeing the same.
So yes, we're still seeing the same screen. So maybe we should just dive into the conversation so that we don't um, lose the time. So stop that screen share again.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. All right.
So
But
we could share that the video is about an experiment that was the first one was when Joanne it
it
was
was
done,
it was many years ago. I don't remember exactly when.
and then it was repeated again. And the
Recently.
experiment was they present two dolls to
Yes.
children, and the one doll is a black doll and one doll is a white doll, and the questions are which doll is the pretty doll, which doll is the ugly doll, and which doll looks like you.
Mhm.
all the children in this video were Black children. When they asked the question, which doll is the pretty doll, most, if not all, if my memory serves me right, chose the white doll as the pretty doll.
Mm-hmm.
And when they asked the question, which is the ugly doll, they pointed or touched the Black doll.
Mm.
And then when they asked the question, which doll looks like you, you would observe that some of them were hesitant to answer. And when they did answer, it was tentatively pointing to the Black doll.
Yeah.
Very, very telling.
Yes.
And the experiment was done 2 different times over it's a span of years. And so the message was very, very clear that within our thinking, within our perception about ourselves as Black children, we are ugly. The message
And we are bad.
And we are bad.
Yes.
So the first question is, what are your observations, Janice and Sylvia, in relation to how children with strong African features view themselves? As teachers, you would have been in the classroom observing these children, the students. What are your observations in relation to how children with strong African features view themselves?
Can I go first? Or
Yes,
Sylvia?
go ahead.
Yes, you may.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I've been teaching for 13 years, but about a year and 8 months of that time is online. So roughly 11 years I've been teaching in classrooms, high schools. I taught one prep school for about 4 months once. The What I see happening is that children with strong African features are usually deemed to be less attractive. Well, that's putting it nicely. They're
Aye.
deemed to be very unattractive. And because of that, they experience things like bullying.
Yes.
They're told that your forehead is too big, your lips are too thick, your nose is too round, too big, and you are too dark. Not just dark, but you're too dark. And so they, more than the others, experience things like bullying. You find that persons are not quick to befriend the children who have those strong African features. We tend to, and I say we, thinking as a child, we tend to gravitate towards the kids who have longer hair. They might have been from a different country. They speak what we consider to be proper English. We gravitate towards them and to the kids who are seen as rich. But the rich ones are not usually the ones with strong African features either.
Oh.
Yes. Yes. So those kids are always experiencing those things. Lucky for me, my mother, I can't say how fully, but she made me think I was so attractive that even though I would have been teased about my big forehead, I never had an issue with the teasing. For me, it was just something fun. I would laugh about it. I have, should I say, I can't say masculine features, but I had very hairy legs. And I would be teased about that too. When I shaved them once when I was 14, I was teased about that too. But I saw it as fun because of how my mother raised me to believe that my difference is actually just variety, and variety is necessary. It wasn't a different it wasn't different bad, but just a variety.
All right, I'm going to
love
put you on
that.
spot here, Janice. I'm going to put you on spot. I want viewers to have a very vivid example of what your mom would have said to you as a child. So pretend that I am the young Janice and you are your mother. Tell me, Janice, the words coming out of your mouth that made me now not take the comments, but just use it as teasing or fun. Sorry. Tell me what your mother said to me. So I'm you and you are your mother. Talk to me.
Yes, I don't want to cry. I honestly don't. I cry easily. Um, so when I was pregnant, before I knew the gender of my baby, I have a son. I wondered what kind of impact I can have, or what do I need to teach him or her growing up in modern Jamaica? Like, what kind of impact? So I have a son. I'm still not sure what I can teach him as a woman to a man, but what my mother did, I remember, I'll share a very brief story. When I cut my first pair of jeans into what we call a battle rider, I remember I was so nervous to go to the shop dressed like that. I was about 13 or 12. And I remember she said to me, "You look good, you know, you look good. Look, boy, you look good." You know? So she made me believe that I have absolutely no reason to 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 be confused about whether I am attractive or not. But it wasn't about other people. You know, so if you were my daughter, I would let you know that, well, depending on your age, so if you were on the older side, I would say to you that regardless of how you look, someone somewhere has an appetite for your type. Um, there are casting directors that are looking for just what you look like. And there's nothing wrong with your kind of variety. You are just different. Variety is necessary. That's what I would say to you, my daughter.
Hey, hey, hey. I like. Wow.
Wow.
If only this is the experience for so many of us, because we may know of persons who have a very different experience from
Yeah.
yours. We
Yes.
have persons who have shared some ridiculously horrible statements made to them growing up. But before I get into that, I'm not sure if Sylvia wants to comment on observations that she has also have had, is having, on how children with strong African features view themselves.
Well, my response to that is in every situation, I believe some kind of education is helpful. Because, first of all, people need to understand that Africa is such a huge continent and every kind of human feature that exists on the planet came out of Africa. So, every kind of face that you can think of is in Africa today.
Mm.
But people tend to think that if you are very black, if you have thick lips, if you have a wide nose, then that's what they define as African. That's African also, but Africa is so much more. And those features for a long, long time were regarded as ugly.
Mhm.
And, but it's an interesting thing that when Europeans decide that a feature is acceptable, then it becomes popular. Because in recent times, Europeans have decided that full lips and big bottoms are in.
Mhm.
So all of a sudden, plastic surgeons are making big bucks putting in these features. I grew up knowing that I was not considered a beautiful child. And how I dealt with that was through, but I also got told that I was a smart child. So from a very tender age, I decided that my smarts would have to take me through the world since I hadn't been blessed with the appropriate looks. And so I became a reader and I developed a vocabulary and I learned how to throw. Listen, I had to teach myself to stop cussing people because that was how I got through the world. I developed a vocab and I learned how to throw barbs.
Mm.
And man, that's not good. But as I became a teacher, I also began to be aware of, because I read voraciously, I began to be aware of how these prejudices were really ridiculous, unreal. What's beautiful in the eyes of one is beauty is completely subjective.
Mhm.
I wrote a piece on Facebook about how I came to appreciate my physicality when I saw a woman who looked like me on the cover of a book and I considered her attractive. I was probably 24 new in my teaching profession, teaching high school. And I started to surround myself with images of people that look like me.
Mm.
And this is something I've continued to do over the years. My son, who happens to be autistic, he's almost 23, has never been surrounded by anything that doesn't look like him or like his family. So you come into my house, everything on my wall depicts blackness unapologetically. And when I was in the high school situation, I pointedly looked for the very black girls and told them beautiful things about themselves. And sometimes I could see the confusion because nobody had ever told them these things.
Mm.
I was very deliberate about that.
Wow.
And even while teaching college, I would seek every opportunity to not just teach the facts, teach the curriculum, but I would constantly speak into my students about their beauty as human beings, their worth, and every chance I got to teach them about their history, I did. Because I didn't see myself as just teaching facts or teaching people to appreciate literature. I
Excellent.
taught my students about how to love themselves.
Yes,
But we have work to do
we
because people are
do.
bleaching their skin.
People are bleaching their skin, and people are, yes, doing a lot of things that are as a result of their negative views of themselves. And as Janice is, sending us some little notes here, and she's saying being deliberate in these matters is absolutely necessary.
Yes.
And the providing the modeling, as Rosie is saying, providing the modeling with the black features, etc. Because it is up to us. And I am wondering now, what books did you ladies read as young children? And were there any of those books that were written by people of African descent, people who look like us? Who's going to go first?
Oh, I'll go first.
Okay.
So I do. So as far as primary school, I don't recall what books I would have been exposed to. I am going to assume, and I might be wrong, that some of the books that we read in primary school were from Caribbean authors. I think most of them were. In high school, in literature, I would have been exposed to African literature, Caribbean literature in high school. And then, of course, at Michael, because I was studying English language and literature, I would have been exposed to
Right.
Caribbean and African authors.
Mm-hmm.
But as it relates to, like, I can't put my finger on one in particular
Yeah.
that I would say, yes. I do think there is an effort by bodies such as CSEC to incorporate all those, like in lit, for example, it has to be Caribbean literature and so on. So those things are a part of it. Even the questions and exam papers, you have pieces from different authors, usually from Caribbean. I have a friend in Trinidad who's an English teacher as well, and she was asking me, I think it was so she was doing some past papers with her students, and she asked me about a question on the CSEC paper that mentioned something about pretty. And she asked me, she said she knows it's Jamaican because the person who wrote it is Jamaican, but what do we consider to be pretty? And I explained to her. So CSEC is doing.
Sorry, what context was this pretty used in?
I don't know, but it was some story or some
Okay.
passage that was on the CSEC language paper.
Okay.
And she wanted that to explain that part to her students. And so she asked me to explain what we consider to be pretty.
And what was that?
I told her pretty for us is something very colorful.
Okay.
Or yes, so
yes.
colorful.
We have to remember that there are non-Jamaicans watching, and they might not understand.
Something very colorful and lively in appearance as well. So bodies like CSEC have been incorporating those things. I mean, because it's necessary, you
Yeah.
know. The only space I can think of really, and I might be going into a different conversation, the only space I don't see that happening quite a lot is the church space.
Yes.
But schools, I believe, are doing that.
It's essential for us. Yes. But Denise, since we are about worship and cultural identity, then it is much more relevant what is happening in the church space in this conversation. You know, I mean, it's all relevant, but it's even much more relevant. Um, so, Sylvia, what do you think? I mean, it seems as if for a while now, people have been intentional, the bodies, as we say, have been intentional about including the African and Caribbean material in what is required in school. But what really is happening in the church space then? And let's remember that we're talking about our children in particular, you know. And later on, we're going to ask you more about what your recommendations would be for children and what they read. But how important is it for us in the church to encourage our children to read material that's written by people who look like them?
Well, if I could just go back to the question in its origin,
Yes.
people have been, I started school in the 60s and I had the NOLA books.
Yes.
And those books, you know, there were black children in the
Yes.
book. But it's crazy that I did not identify with those children.
Those children were black? Seriously?
Yes, yes, Nola, Patsy, and Dorothy. Go back and think of what their hair looked like. Yes, those are black children. But the world in which they lived was not something that I could identify with. It was not
Yes.
familiar. It was just not familiar to me. So they felt very foreign. I enjoyed them.
Yes.
But as I mentioned before, I've always been a voracious reader. And so I read everything that I saw.
Mm-hmm.
But some of which I shouldn't have read, but anyway.
We heard you. So me telling the people that she radicalized me.
But
Sylvia, just a pause. You can actually turn on back that light, you know.
okay.
Yeah,
All right.
we can see you better.
All right. I
Yeah,
was just
man.
following your original
Yes,
lead.
me know.
But Vic Reed,
Yes.
the books he wrote about the Maroons in particular.
Mm-hmm.
I read in the 4th grade, I read about Nanny of the Maroons, and I felt tremendous pride in the fact that here was this black woman who could catch bullets with her behind. And
So them say.
I don't know if that was in the book, but my father told me that. So I developed tremendous pride.
Yes.
I mean, the Maroons are controversial, but that's another story for another time.
Mm-hmm.
I read the stories written by Andrew Salkey, Hurricane, Earthquake, and so on. I read the stories written by C. Everett Palmer. I read Merle Hodge, Crick Crack Monkey, and so on. But I always felt that we didn't have enough. We didn't have enough of the books that showed us ourselves. And at the risk of being accused of self-promotion, that is why I wrote The Road to Timnath. I wrote the book
to promote. Yes.
I wrote the book that I wanted to read when I was growing up.
Yes.
A book filled with people who looked like me, spoke like my elders, gave forth the wisdom of, you know, the African wisdom that I heard growing up. I wrote about the kinds of things that people did and said. I wrote extensively about religion because I grew up in the church. You see. But I still think that in the church, there's work to be done.
Yes.
You know, we've come a ways, but there's work to be done. And I kind of feel bad to be even saying that because I am not one of those writing specifically for the church. What I write, church folks can read. but I haven't written any kind of Sunday school material or anything like that. So I don't want to be too harsh about that, because I believe firmly, if you're not willing to do something about something, don't be too strident about how you talk about it. But the church has always been, at the risk of angering folks, the church really has always been a very Europeanized space.
The church that you have experienced, the church
Yes,
in
the
Jamaica.
church that yes.
Okay.
Well, I always felt that I had to put down at the door some essential parts of me
Yes.
in order to go in order to be acceptable to the divine.
Wow.
And that always troubled me. Always
Yes.
troubled me. And
Wow.
I'm not here saying that every aspect of our culture is acceptable to God. That's not what I'm saying. But if every time you go into worship, you have to put aside the essence of self, then that is really a very traumatizing experience.
Yes.
And I had it. I had the trauma. I am 59 and I am in the process of decolonizing my religious experience.
Wow.
Getting rid of ideas and taking up, struggling with ideas like that God is a man, that God is male.
Even
Assigning
though the
gender
Bible
to
says
God.
God is spirit. Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Rosie McLagan Hines, Sister Rosie, says, I try to include at least 80% Black looks in my PowerPoint presentations for church, for school, etc. And Rosie is a guidance counselor too, and is a pastor's wife. So she has all of this access to people, and
Amen
also
to that.
pictures on her status, etc. Sometimes I put my own to make my point, she says. And yes, so, and Marcel Goff online too, I'm reading the online comments, says he's honored to have one of his photos on the book cover. So thanks for making that possible.
Yes,
Sylvia.
yes.
And
thanks. I should thank Marcel.
Needham says, ha! I wonder, does this mean, Philbert, that you have read part 1? Because Philbert says, please ask Sylvia Dennis-Gilfillian, when can we expect part 2 of The Road to Timnath?
I'm working on it.
He's working on it. Well, we can't
I'm
do any better
I'm
than
9
that.
chapters in. 9 chapters in.
Okay. And, well, we are waiting. We are waiting with bated breath, with the butter in one hand and the knife in the other hand, waiting for the bread to come out of the oven. We are waiting. Yes. Denise,
Yes.
we read. Why?
I want to talk about language, because language is such an important part of our identity. And I'm noticing that both writers, both teachers, both of our guests, they both use the Jamaican language in the stories that they read at the beginning. Were you always this comfortable with using Jamaican for the children?
Yes, I was. So I grew up. My mom is just a wonderful influence on my life. So I grew up with a mother who uh, she's fluent in Jamaican, in standard Jamaican English, and also Portuguese recently.
Wow.
But growing up, my mother used both consistently. So I don't recall ever hearing speak properly. I don't recall ever hearing that I wasn't speaking in a way that was acceptable in at home or elsewhere. I wasn't raised that way. And she sounded beautifully when she used both. And so I was raised to use both. I might use one more than the other now, but like I must admit, I do use standard Jamaican English more, simply because most of the persons I know would have been teachers, and so we speak in that way. But I've used both all the time. I use both.
Okay.
Yeah, so I never had an issue because of how I was raised. So it is in me to speak both languages.
Yeah.
Janice, I need to ask, where's your mother?
Yes, don't it?
She lives in the US. No, she didn't
She
do
not
well.
normal. She not normal.
No.
She not normal. Wow.
I think to a great extent, we can respond to struggles or trauma in two different ways. We become what traumatized us, or we passionately protest it. What my mother did was to protest. Without knowing,
Amen.
she protested everything that wasn't right for her. So she tried her very best.
Mm,
She tried her very best.
She
Yeah.
did good. She did
yes,
good.
love that. Love.
Love that. Love that. Love that.
I am just in awe, if I may cut in. I'm just in awe. I never had the privilege of even hearing that the language that I spoke was acceptable.
Hmm.
And Joanne, you might be surprised, but your work with the Patois Bible and promoting the use of our own language in worship helped me tremendously in my writing.
Wow.
It did. It did. I might not have said it before,
Hmm.
but it's almost like you gave me permission
Jeez.
to do the thing that was in my heart.
Imagine.
Because I feel it takes a lot to make me cry, but I'm tearing up. I struggled. It took me 16 years to write The Road to Timnath because I couldn't settle on the language. I had the story,
Mm,
but I couldn't settle on the language.
mm,
And it was Joanne who helped me
mm.
to embrace what was within me and to put it out because I was scared to death. I know it surprises people who know me to hear Sylvia Dennis say that she was afraid of something, but I was scared because this was like I was giving birth
But we
and
understand, Sylvia, we understand because we heard from you earlier that for 1 year, remind, correct me if I'm wrong, for one
yeah.
year you were kept silent.
Well, silent is a strong word, but I didn't speak up in class. I didn't
Exactly, because you
because
were told that
you
your
chat bad.
language
Yeah,
was
you chat
not
too bad.
acceptable. Yes.
My
So we
first week,
understand.
my first week in high school, I was saying something to a friend, and a senior student turned around and said, "Pick your chat, buddy."
Mm-mm.
And that was like a knife to my heart. I
Mm,
was ashamed,
mm.
and I became silent basically, and I started to listen to how the other students sounded, so that I could sound like
Copy
them.
them. Yes.
Yes, I could copy them because I understood English. I wrote it well, but I didn't speak it well, you see.
Mm.
And but what happened to me as a consequence of those experiences is that I became almost schizophrenic because I learned to mimic and speak the Queen's English on the outside, but the patois talking picnic was always on the inside, trying to tear her way out.
Mm. Mm. Jeez. Denise, why are we getting? And she started saying something about giving birth. Does that
Yes.
sound reminiscent of something we have heard recently?
Yes.
Last week,
Yes.
Marcia said the same thing about her movie making,
Yes.
giving birth. And this is what God is doing through his people. He is impregnating people with the works, and it seems to be through the language, through the music,
It's the language
through the
that makes us
writing,
human. It's
through the
language that
art.
makes us human. It's
Mm,
language that makes us human. And when
mm.
you tell a human being that their language is no good, you're telling them that they're not fully human.
Ah,
And I'm amazed when I see the work I do. I do work online where I write Jamaican stories, as you know, Joanne.
yes,
I put a lot of my stories on Vintage. And have to I have to chill when I see the kind of responses that some people give because I see the evidence that we Jamaicans, especially those patois talking Jamaicans, are more critical of patois than especially patois talking Jamaicans who get little privilege,
yes,
are
yes.
more Lord help us here today.
While you ask for help, and while you wait for the help, Philbert
Yeah.
Needham online says, I enjoyed reading The Road to Timnath. And I think I also told you that my mother read it out loud to my father, and they enjoyed it as well. So,
Well,
and
thank you, Filbert.
Marcel Goff is saying to Janice's mom, big up mommy.
Yes,
And
I agree.
and he's saying, Sister Joe, keep doing what God gave you to do. And thank you, Sister Sylvia. Um, so Janice is saying, I need to read that book as well. Trust me, Janice, that book, the characters will stay with you and you will be asking, like the rest of us, when is the sequel coming out? And we
I need to
interviewed,
get it.
yes, we interviewed Sylvia in the first issue of the KW magazine about that whole process. And Sylvia, I remembered how you wanted to give a voice to the voiceless um, Jamaicans, to those who were being made to feel that their speech was not good enough. And as you're saying, because when you validate a language, you validate the speakers of that language. So in the
Yes.
converse, is that when you do not validate a language, it is as if you're taking away the humanity of the people. And me not take it back. I believe
Listen,
that.
May, yes, go ahead.
I have an expression. It's not very pretty, but my take on it is that Jamaica talk has been treated like a chamber pot,
Mhm.
necessary but must be kept out of sight.
Ah, so then,
I would like to add
yes.
something. So, in keeping with what we're discussing now about language and being human, so in my job, I teach students from different countries to speak English. And one student said to me, maybe a month ago or so, he said to me, he was very nervous, which I understand. Learning a new language can be, quite nerve-wracking. And
Daunting, yes.
I said to him, I said, it's difficult. And he said, teacher, um, not as accurate as I'm saying it now, but he said, in essence, teacher, uh, I am, I have to become a new person to use the English language. And I
Ah,
said, yes, because,
wow.
because a language, it has a lot to do with how you think. There's
Yes.
some languages, for example, that don't have certain words. I
Mhm.
remember when there was a tsunami some years ago, somewhere in Asia,
Mhm.
there was a group of people that was interviewed. They found them they lived in the mountains, but also near the sea.
Mhm.
They knew that disaster was coming because they were one with the animals. And so when they saw like the birds and so on
Yeah.
retreating, they knew disaster was coming.
Hmm.
In their language, there was no word for a certain time. I don't know if it was yesterday or a specific day, but because they didn't have the word to define that specific thing, they couldn't think about it.
Mm.
Think, for example, if we don't have the word hate. All right. Perfect example. So while I was at Michael, of course, we'd have done things about the Rastafarian culture and so on, and how language affects thought.
Mhm.
Now, because they are about positive thinking, they would say things like overstand,
Yes.
instead of understand. So they
Yes.
speak positivity. So language affects how we think
Yes.
about ourselves, the language we hear and the language we speak.
Yes.
There was a kidnapping that happened in the US years ago, the Cleveland kidnappings, where three girls, they were between 10 and 13, they were kidnapped. For 10 years, they were kidnapped.
Yes.
One of them spoke Spanish, her native language. The other two spoke English. When they escaped, the parents of the Spanish speaking one realized that she did not speak Spanish anymore and she didn't
Mm-mm.
understand Spanish. She
Mhm.
lost her language. And so
Wow.
if language affects thought,
Yes.
uh, uh, it means then that if we don't use what comes naturally,
Mhm.
we're going to lose also what comes
Ourselves.
naturally. Yeah.
Yes.
So we
Wow.
have to be very careful of
We
that.
have to be extremely careful. And so we give thanks to both of you for adding to the material that is there for us to read, for us to even, and I am going to say we need definitely more reading material for our children, for the young children. Online, Philbert Needham says, perhaps you should explain chamber pot. Some non-Jamaicans may not understand the chamber pots. So here's what the chamber pot is. Now, chamber is another word for room. So it's the pot you keep in your room under your bed so you don't have to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. Is that clear?
It's a commode.
Commode. Well, boy, Dennis, we need to be wrapping up now, don't?
Oh, yes. We certainly haven't been able to go in depth with some other questions, but the time is, as usual,
Yes.
the time is against us.
Yes.
The time is against us. Here's what I'd love to do. We're on the matter of language, and maybe we could do it for the next episode. I'd love for us to read a portion from the Jamaican New Testament,
Yes.
where we're showing the actual words in the Jamaican language, and we are also showing the English translation for those who are not familiar with the interpretation. And that's a request that I'm putting out there, where we do that, because the language that we have, using Janice's term that she shared earlier on, free language is pretty. It's pretty. It's very colorful. A lot of times when you hear, sometimes you don't even know what it means, but the way it is said, and the word itself, that was, you don't have to ask for them. You do not have to ask what is meant, right? Yes. So I would love for us to share with our viewers again the beauty and the richness and the depth of our language.
Yes.
And may I just add here that the title for this episode is Jesus Loves the Little Children, Black Like Me. And I want to add what David said: let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight. So if my language, the words coming out of my mouth is X, and the meditation of my heart, I speak in the Jamaican heart language, it is acceptable in his sight, because he understands it.
Yes.
He understands
it.
Yes. Okay. Yes. And then in Revelation, he said the angel will fly to every tribe and nation and language and people. So nobody has the right to denounce a language or denounce a particular
people's language. Yeah.
A people's language, because the message is for every language.
Amen. Amen. So I wonder, as we wrap up, if Sylvia and Janice could each give some specific advice to parents, wherever you are, as a person of African heritage, whether you're on the continent or in the diaspora, Jamaica or US or anywhere else. What advice would you give to parents in terms of raising Black children with positive self-concept? And we've already got quite a few answers, but just to kind of put it in a nutshell.
If I may go, start by loving your children.
Yes.
No matter what else you do, if you don't love them, love your children. Accept your children. Accept their physicality. Never ever compare your children one to another. Never ever tell your children that they're ugly. Never. Never make your children feel small. You don't want to raise conceited children. Children must be disciplined. They must be held accountable, but they must always know that you love them. Surround your children with images of themselves and people who look like them. Deliberately teach them about the accomplishments of great men and women of color
Yes.
that they will know, because once they know that they come from people who have achieved greatness, then there is nothing that they can't dream of.
Yes.
It is important to plant those seeds in them from very early.
Mm-hmm.
And be very careful about who is teaching your children. Check those computers, those tablets, those phones. Make sure that the messages that they are receiving are the messages that tell them that they are of worth. They were born for a purpose. God loves them just because they are human, and that nobody is more human than any other group. And let them know that the language, particularly with Jamaican children,
Yes.
let them know that the language that they speak is acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
Don't ever, ever shame them for the language that they speak.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that you don't want them to learn and master English. Yes, that's important,
Mm-hmm.
but they shouldn't have to give up what they already know in order to master what they need to master.
That's
Use
right.
what they already know as a platform for what they need to know.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. Miguel Grace Sloan, I happen to know he's listening from Costa Rica. He says, thank you so much for this conversation. And Sharon Sams says, I am blessed by this. She says, that's right. The message is for every language. And Marcel Goff says, yes, every language. And yes, Rinthi, good that you're on. And it is Sylvia Dennis right here with us, live and in living color. So, Janice, what is your word for the parents?
Well,
How old is Malachi, by the way?
6.5 months now.
6.5 months. All right, tell us. Let us hear your wisdom.
So I feel like I could hug Sylvia. I don't know her personally, but Sylvia, I thank God for you. I thank God for what you are doing.
Mm-hmm.
But I thank God mostly for the fact that you are deliberate in changing the narrative. It's not enough to just write a story and leave it there. We have to sort of travel on the journey of changing the narrative and not just drop something on the way for somebody else. So I thank God for you for that. My final words, I think I mentioned some of it before, but the matter of positive self-concept. So parents cannot teach what they don't know.
No, true that.
And there are many parents who are struggling with seeing themselves as valuable. I think to a great extent, persons who are my mother's age, in their 50s and 60s, would have gotten the harsher part as it relates to language and acceptance. So those persons who are parenting now, they might struggle with a positive self-concept. And so it's difficult to pass that on. And then if my mother didn't do what she did, I might have be on a path to raise my son in that same way. So what I would say is to parents, first, you can't teach what you don't believe. So get help. Get help if you don't see yourself as valuable. Get help. And then I want to mention, as I mentioned before, that who you are, how you look, how you speak, how you move. I always say I can spot Jamaicans abroad because of how they walk. Jamaicans have a unique walk.
That is so true.
Always. So who we are, everything about our identity is simply a matter of variety. And variety is necessary in the grand scheme of things. Even so for movies, we want to see different kinds of characters. In music, we want different kinds of music. In foods, we want different kinds of food. In drinks, it's the same. Who you are is a matter of variety.
Yes.
accept that fact and know that variety is a necessary part of life. That's
Yes,
it.
that is awesome. Denise,
Mm.
final word. Okay, let me, before we do final word, there are some people who are saying things. Um, Marcel Goff again says, love the children, both yours and your neighbors.
Yes.
Surround the children with photos, drawings, etc., of people of African descent.
Yes.
Language is life. So Rinty says, thanks, I got the end, but it is rich. And Marcel says, thank you, Sister Sylvia. Big up the guests. And I am adding my big up to the guests. He says, honesty sets us free with God in the middle. And
Yes.
really and truly, and Rosie is saying, love the variety. Enough, enough. And Garvey said, not that Garvey said it here, some Marcel is quoting Garvey here. A people without knowledge of our past is like a tree without roots.
Yes.
I our vision is that tomorrow's world, tomorrow's world, because of how we train our children today, will be a different world. And Janice, I've been quoting from Malachi. Malachi chapter 3, verse 16 says, the people who feared the Lord spoke with each other, and a book of remembrance was opened. So, this is us speaking with each other once again, a conversation that I believe will have sparked off all kinds of things that will bring transformation. Denise, I don't talk now. I think I talk too much on this show.
Just
Yes.
to just to reiterate what Sylvia and Janice just said so beautifully in the context of our conversation today, I'd like to read Psalm 139, verse 14.
Yeah.
And I'm saying this specifically to all my brothers and sisters within the African diaspora and in Africa.
Mhm.
I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, and I know that full well. Let nobody take away this affirmation from you.
Amen, amen,
Amen.
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 So guess what? We are beg God to bless you and keep you. Hold on, before I get into that, I just want to remind us of where to get the magazine. All 4 issues are available for download, the PDF, on spuropen.com, which Rosie has put, and we'll put again the link under the comments on the KW Magazine page. And by the way, if you sign up on the KW Magazine page, you will get an email each week telling you of what is happening. After next week, we're going to be talking about reparation with Reverend Dr. Stephen Jennings. And there is an article in the most recent magazine about that as well. So remember that if you purchase a copy of the magazine, you will also get the Come Make We Worship album along with it, right? So, by the way, Janice, you see what she said, her son is 6.5 months old. She bought the album for her son and sent me a video clip
Yes.
of him enjoying this album. Little children
Yes.
love it as well. So get the magazine, you get a 2-for-1. Get the magazine, any number of issues you want, and you'll also get the magazine, the music to go along with it. All right. This is now the ready for the blessing now. We are beg God to bless you and keep you. We are begging him to smile upon you. We are begging him to show him love even though none of we not deserve it, and we are begging to look upon we and give it feeling peace today and tomorrow and the next day and the next day. You know what? Good and one love.